Reversals are one of tarot's biggest love it or hate it debates. Some tarot readers just turn their cards upright and move on, while others basically double their deck by including them. To add to this confusion, there is no one single true correct way to read reversals. But that's actually where it gets interesting. Today, I'm sharing 8 different methods that I have tried for reading reversed cards. This video actually started as a Tarot Lab experiment over on Patreon, but I wanted to bring the highlights over here too. So if you enjoy this video and you want to go deeper, you can access the full archive of Tarot Lab resources and experiments over there. But in the meantime, let's get into different ways to read tarot reversals. Whether or not to include reversed cards in your tarot readings is such a personal choice. For me, it is such a deck by deck choice as well, and even depends on the kind of reading I'm doing and the kind of question I'm asking. Typically speaking, reversals are usually seen as more negative, which makes it harder to sugarcoat a reading, which I consider to be a good thing. But that said, in my experience, reversals work best when they're highlighting imbalance or they're trying to redirect the energy. So it's not just about adding negativity into your readings. There's always going to be dogma if you look for it. There is definitely going to be people saying there are correct ways and that you have to include reversals or that you shouldn't include reversals. There are lots of different ways to interpret a reversed card. I'm going to run through 8 different methods. I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to speed run things a little bit of some of the ways to interpret reversed cards. So let's get into it. I'm splitting these methods into 3 different groupings. So first up, we have the kind of basic reversals, the most common sort of methods that you've probably come across in like beginner tarot guides, maybe a deck guidebook, things like that. Then there are what I'm calling energetic reversals. And finally, the kind of reversal that is like a sort of shadow meaning and playing with that idea of like the shadow side to a card. First up, under basic reversals, we have the idea of visual gravity. So quite literally read the card upside down and what's happening when you do that. So here we have the 3 of Cups. And if you read the card literally visually upside down, they are, instead of holding their cups up and kind of cheersing, they are deliberately pouring them out. So how could I interpret that as a reversed energy, a reversed meaning? So instead of the usual kind of celebration and togetherness, community, collaboration, friendship, what I see here is maybe we are letting something go. Maybe we're letting go of the friendships that drain us. Conversely, instead of letting go of what drains us, maybe we are doing that thing where so you know the phrase you can't pour from an empty cup, but here we have full cups, and maybe that's what we're seeing here, is that we've got these people who are in community with each other, who are friends with each other, are sort of pouring out their own cups to help each other and help their community. So see, reversals don't always have to be negative. It's just a very different way of reading the card. The second type of reading reversal is to read the opposite meaning, and I think this is pretty self-explanatory. This is probably the type of reversal that I first came across when I was first learning tarot. You take the card's typical meaning and you invert it, which, you know, is great if you're pulling like the scary cards. If I pull something like the Tower, the Nine of Swords, I'd love to consider the opposite meaning of that. But here we have the Ace of Swords, which upright is often new ideas, new inspiration, new intellectual project, maybe something like that. So the inverse of that, the opposite meaning, is maybe like a intellectual block. Maybe you are stuck for figuring out the situation that you're in or finding a solution to a problem. Maybe you're looking for inspiration and it's not coming. Or I suppose another way to interpret this could be to stop looking for new ideas and rehash some of your old ideas as well. The aces are often seen as like a good omen, I think. So you could also just read it as simple as that. This is actually a bad omen. It's the opposite of the typical meaning. It is a new idea that's going to be unsuccessful, maybe. Or maybe you are connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. Maybe the flash of insight that you've had is actually factually incorrect, perhaps. So that is the idea of reading the opposite meaning for a reversal. The third method I want to talk about is the absence of the typical or the upright meaning, and this is subtly different from the opposite of the usual meaning. So instead of contrast, this is what happens when you just don't have any of whatever the card represents to begin with. So we're kind of imagining what the situation would be if there had never been any of the energy that the card is showing you, which is a really interesting one to read because although this isn't the opposite interpretation, it is the opposite of how typically you read. You read for clarity, you read for the answer, and instead this method of reading reversals is saying, okay, so imagine if you just don't have any of that. So for instance, the Emperor. Upright, the Emperor I tend to read as power, control, boundaries, overseeing things, having a lot of authority, having a lot of power in whatever context that might mean. And to read that in reverse, to read as the absence of this meaning, I guess I would perhaps read that as this is a situation where you have never had any power or control or authority. One of my favorite keywords for the Emperor is boundaries. And so maybe you're reading about a situation where you don't have the authority or the conviction to set boundaries and to set limits and to be able to say, okay, this is my domain of what I need to take care of, and this is outside of my control. These are things I just have to live and let live. Approaching the situation from that angle instead of just like the answer is authority. The answer is actually to redefine the situation completely. So now we have the energetic reversals as I am referring to them. And first up, we have an idea of extremes of energy, which can go either way. So you've got maybe too much or too little of whatever the upright meaning of the card is. It is maybe over or under developed. And personally, I really like this approach because you can decide in the context of the reading which end of the spectrum it's going to go. So for instance, here with the Hierophant, upright, I see the Hierophant as a bit of a gatekeeper, a keeper of knowledge and also a dispenser of knowledge. You know, you've got the acolytes there, and this Hierophant is a teacher. This is somebody who has very specialist, perhaps sacred, perhaps not. I don't always read this as a religious card, definitely not a spiritual card. And so usually this is somebody who holds the keys to a lot of wisdom and information, and their job is to share that wisdom and information. So if we're reading that in reverse, as extremes of energy, I feel like too much of that energy is when you get gatekeepy, is when you get somebody who feels a bit overpowered in that role and is maybe abusing that power of deciding who gets to learn certain information and who doesn't. They are being gatekeepy and they are withholding that knowledge from others. And then perhaps on the other end of the spectrum, I think too little Hierophant energy is interesting, actually. I've never thought about this before. I've never thought about what too little of the Hierophant would look like. But I think with the way that I've just described it, too little of the Hierophant perhaps is talking about a situation where nobody is maintaining knowledge. Perhaps we're talking about a type of knowledge that is not being sort of held and maintained. I think of libraries a lot. I think of practices where you need a record. I'm thinking about histories. I'm thinking about libraries. I'm thinking about the importance of having, of keeping information so that you don't, one doesn't forget or misrepresent the past, or I don't know, even in a context of something like medicine. I think this is an example I've used before to kind of take it out of its religious context. If I'm going to have somebody perform surgery on me, I want that person to have gone through the required training and learning and, you know, accreditation or whatever to feel safe that they are going to do a good job performing that surgery. You can't just decide to call yourself a brain surgeon. That would be a world that I think a lot of us don't want to live in. So maybe the sort of too little Hierophant energy is that kind of thing. Anyway, moving swiftly on. The next method is, again, with this like energetic reversal, the idea of a blockage of the energy of the card, maybe a hesitation, maybe a delay. And the way I read this is, or the way I consider this is, something is getting in the way of the energy of the card. and is stopping it from fully manifesting, fully kind of coming to fruition or being present. Maybe it's on pause, maybe it's waiting for something else to happen, maybe there's something bigger that's overpowering it, that's blocking it. So, for instance, the Two of Wands upright, this might be about making plans, making big grand plans, trying to initiate something, initiate a new project, sort of spread your wings. This is a very colonial card, so quite literally, you're surveying the horizon, surveying land, and deciding how you're going to um, spread your ideas. Maybe we'll put it that way. So reversed, a blockage of this energy. I think a blockage of this energy could look like quite literally there's something in the way of you being able to initiate your ideas. Maybe that's something internal, like a confidence issue, a self belief issue. Maybe it's something external, like whatever your plan is, whatever your passion is. There's some person, some institution, some fact of reality that's getting in the way of you being able to sort of do that initial push and get things moving. Maybe in, the context of a wider reading of a question, the blockage is that actually your idea is like not that good. The reason that you're not able to kind of survey your lands and conquer them is because your idea is actually not that strong. It's not powerful enough to do what you want it to do, and you need to go back to the drawing board a little bit. Although I suppose this card kind of is the drawing board, but it's also the initiation. I'm thinking very much of that like Mars and Aries energy. It's very much like go and ask questions later. And I think perhaps in like a blockage, you are actually needing to be doing a little bit of thinking, doing a little bit of asking questions, or maybe the blockage is that you are too much in that stage. As with lots of these, it could go in a few different directions. And this is the kind of way that I like to read reversals, is something like this, because there are a few different ways that you could interpret it. And then another method of energetic reversals is the idea of energy that is receding, that is fading. So with this, a reversed card in a spread would indicate that the meaning is not necessarily different to the upright interpretation, but that it's in a kind of waning phase and it is coming to a close. So, for instance, here with the Eight of Swords, which is already handily reversed for us, upright, this is you're getting in your own way, you are coming up with problems and trapping yourself, and I'm being a little bit blasé, but I don't want to say your problems are all in your head, but that is kind of what springs to mind when I see this card. I'm like, actually, what you need is action. You're overthinking things and you're creating problems that don't really exist. It's kind of a blunt way to put that card. So if I'm reading this in reverse with the idea of receding energy, perhaps it is a sign that maybe you've been putting some effort into overcoming those kind of limiting beliefs and those thoughts that keep you feeling trapped, and maybe you're coming to the end of this phase of whatever this reading might be referring to, and maybe you've been doing some work and that's been paying off. Maybe you're just coming to the end of a rough patch, because I know I'm certainly not going to be the only one who, there are times when I do a lot of Eight of Swords stuff. There are times when I'm far too in my own head, when I'm inventing problems that don't need to exist. And there are times that for some reason I seem to have confidence and self-belief. So maybe that's what it's indicating, that this figure is coming to the end of one of those times. The meaning of the card is the same, but it's about what phase you're in, kind of how to apply the message is in reverse, and you're saying, okay, so this has been happening and it's coming to an end. Maybe something's going to happen that sort of finishes it. Maybe it's finishing its natural life cycle. Maybe if you read predictively, maybe you could read this as, okay, you're about to do something, whatever it is you've got planned, whatever it is that you've been working on, whatever it is the other cards are suggesting, are going to give you this outcome where this card, the energy of this card is like coming to a close. So there we have the idea of receding energy. All right, I have two more reversal methods for you, and these are both with the idea of like a shadow side, a shadow meaning to the cards. So the next one, our seventh overall method, is the idea of a hidden or subconscious meaning interpretation. And this kind of reversal highlights something that you're not seeing. Maybe it's hidden, maybe you are refusing to see it. It's something that is there that you're not really looking at because you're focusing on something else. And this is maybe something that needs a little bit of extra attention or intention to fully reveal itself and to kind of bring to the forefront, because it is currently in the subconscious. Like, you know it's there, but you're not really trying to engage with it. So here we've got the Magician, which is creation, manifestation. It is having everything at your disposal and being able to create out of finite options, and sort of, make your own magic, manifest your destiny. And so in reverse, this is really interesting as a subconscious, perhaps. I've talked a lot about the idea of like limiting beliefs and issues with self belief, but maybe you could see this as like, okay, subconsciously, the Magician is there. Subconsciously, maybe you know that you can achieve, that you can make happen what you want to make happen, but you're not willing to see that because you're scared to try, you're scared to fail, you're scared to succeed, even all of those cheesy self help things. The Magician is also about manipulation in a very literal sense of manipulating what's in front of you, what you have access to, in order to create what you want to create. And if we're stretching that definition of manipulation slightly, maybe what is subconscious about this card is that you have been manipulating a situation and you kind of don't want to think about it. Or you could manipulate a situation, but you don't want to think about it. So that sort of energy for the Magician in reverse there. And then finally, the final method of reading reversals that I want to talk about is negative aspect, shadow side, negative influence. What does the worst possible interpretation of this card look like? This feels like such a bad faith method of reading reversals, but if you don't like to sugarcoat your readings, then maybe this one is for you. I am sort of pushing this to the extreme a little bit because it's not how I think anyone really encourages you to read reversals, but I think it is in line with what people sometimes think a reversal is. It's like, oh, it's bad. And for instance, the Queen of Swords, I think the worst possible interpretation of the Queen of Swords is one that I see quite a lot. And for reference, I am a Queen of Swords. I am a Libra. And I think the worst interpretation of the Queen of Swords is that she's kind of a bitch. She's cruel. She's cutting. She's harsh. She is all intellect. She doesn't care about your feelings. She just wants to cut to the heart of the matter, tell it like it is. And maybe it's the kind of person who will say, oh, I'm just being honest, as an excuse to be mean. I think we've all met those people where they're saying, "Oh, I'm just brutally honest." And I'm like, "No, you're kind of a bitch." So that's a shadow side to the Queen of Swords, is if you take that airiness, that big old sword, to its extreme, you run the risk of being all mind and all logic over feeling, over not feeling, all logic over care, because the priority is the truth, is the clarity of the situation. And sometimes that clarity is really cutting. I think it's actually very fitting that we end there on the Queen of Swords because, like I say, I'm a Queen of Swords. So that interpretation of the Queen of Swords as a bit of a bitch uh, is one that I've come across a lot. And I kind of have a love hate relationship with it. But anyway, out of all of these methods, my favorites are the ones that are about how the card is behaving and not necessarily about being like a positive or a negative meaning. I think the tarot is a lot more flexible than that. I think this is true of upright meanings as well. Cards are not good or bad. Cards do not have single keyword meanings to my mind. Cards contain whole universes within them. It wouldn't make sense for me in my practice to see an upright card as this very nuanced, complex idea, and then to reduce a reversed meaning to just like a single keyword and a single idea. It just doesn't work for me. So I like the types of reversal that let you work them out in the context of the reading, like the idea of reading the card as like an extreme of energy, because you can decide whether it means like the most extreme or the least extreme. That's not what I mean. Whether it's like the most intense version of that card or if it's kind of lacking the energy of that card. The methods like that. And ultimately, there is no single correct method, as I've said. Of course, there's no single correct method. I've just shown you 8 different methods. And while I'm not going to pretend to know everything about tarot reversals, I do know that there is no single right way to do it. It's your practice. It should work for you. Your reading style is your own. If you do read reversals, I would love to know how you read them. If you read one of these methods, if you read a mix, if you read a different way entirely, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you don't read reversals, tell me why not, because I too don't really read reversals even still. I did a month of reading reversals in the Tarot Lab. I'm more open to the idea, but it has not yet made its way into my regular kind of practice. So let me have all your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like to see more from me or get access to the full reversals Tarot Lab or any of the other themes we've done in the Tarot Lab, the link to my Patreon page is in the description, along with a link to Etsy, all that good stuff. If you're not so fussed about the Tarot Lab, but you'd like to support what I do here, I do now have channel memberships here on YouTube. It's just a tip jar. There is absolutely no expectation, but of course, if you do want to support me, it would be greatly appreciated. And that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Give me a like if you like it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.